Come here. Say hi to the people. Say hi. Say hi. Hey everybody, for those who don't know me, I'm Devin. I'm a graduate mental health counseling student, but also somebody who's been dealing with mental health issues for her entire life. On this channel, I try to combine those two perspectives to educate you guys on mental illness, but also to show you that you are not alone in this journey. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the process of starting therapy, how to make your appointment, and what's going to happen at that appointment once you go. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back and thank you so much. If you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button so that way you don't miss any of my future videos, and smash that like button for me. So without further ado, let's start the video. In order to start therapy, the first thing you need to do is find a therapist to go to. Now, there are a couple different ways that you can do this. If you have insurance, get your insurance card, and on the back there should be a member services number. You can call that number and they will be able to tell you all of the people in your area that take your insurance. A lot of insurance companies also have online databases, so you can log into your insurance account online and find out which doctors in your area take your insurance that way. If you don't have insurance, it's a little bit more difficult to find a practice or a therapist that you can go to. What you have to do is you have to go online, either Google, Bing, whichever search engine you like to use, and type in therapy practices in my area. Now, what I would look for is practices that work on a sliding scale, so you pay based on what you earn. If you're having trouble finding an affordable therapist without insurance, you could try going to opencounseling.com, where the whole goal of that website is to connect people with affordable counseling services in their area. When you're doing your research, either through your insurance company or on your own, I would suggest that you find at least 3 to 5 practices that you would be comfortable going to. Now, this is because not all practices are accepting new patients at the time, so you want to make sure you have multiple options. At this point, it's time to actually start calling those practices to see if you can get an appointment with any of them. Now, there are a few questions that you need to ask when you're on the phone before you make your appointment. First, even if you found the therapy practice through your insurance, I would always double check to make sure they actually take your insurance. Second, you need to ask if they're accepting new patients. If they're not, thank them for their time and call the next one. If they are, then you can keep going. The third question I would ask would be about cost. Now, if you have insurance, the cost is typically around the same as your copay when you go to the doctor's office. However, if you don't have insurance and you're paying on a sliding scale, you may want to know how much you're paying up front. When I first moved down south, I didn't have health insurance, so I had to call around to a lot of places to figure out how much it was going to cost. I found prices ranging from $75, which is very reasonable, to $350 for a 1-hour appointment. That is insane. Obviously, the price of therapy without insurance is going to vary based on the area that you live in. However, for me, if they told me a price over $100, I called and tried to find somewhere else. Once you find a practice that takes your insurance if you have it, is accepting new patients, and doesn't cost a ridiculous amount of money for an appointment, then you can schedule an appointment just like you would any other doctor's appointment. Prior to your appointment, it might be easy to gather all of your things together so that way you have everything ready for when you need to go. The things that you absolutely need for your first appointment are a valid ID, your insurance card if you have it, and some form of payment so that you can either pay the copay or the cost of the session itself. I would also take a few minutes before your first therapy appointment to really gather your thoughts about what you want this process to be. Why are you going to therapy? What would you like to get out of it? What are your goals? It'll make it a lot easier and less stressful, and you'll feel less put on the spot later on in the appointment when they ask you all these same questions. I also like to take time before any therapy appointment to just relax and ground myself, because therapy is a very stressful and anxiety-inducing thing, especially if you're doing it for the first time. So you want to make sure you're as calm as you can be when you're going into it. The last thing I would say to do before going to your therapy appointment is try to make sure your physical body is taken care of. Get a good night's sleep, eat some food. If all you can think about is how hungry you are, or how tired you are, or how thirsty you are, then it's going to be really hard for you to focus and work with the therapist in front of you. Once you arrive for your first appointment, the check-in process is very similar to that at a doctor's office. I would try to come at least 15 to 20 minutes before your appointment, so that way you can fill out any new patient paperwork that they may need from you. You go into an office that either looks similar to a teacher's office or a mini living room. There's usually a desk, a couch, a comfortable chair. You can lay down if you want to, but you're not required to. It's supposed to be a comfortable, cozy space, so you feel safe enough to open up, but at the same time, it's still supposed to feel professional. Once you and the therapist have settled into the office, they're probably going to introduce themselves a little bit, tell you about their credentials, their educational background, just so you know where they're coming from. Then comes to everybody's favorite part, paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork. Usually the first thing that you'll go over is the practice policies. Now this is sort of a contract between the therapist and the client of how things are going to work. It includes things such as cancellation policies or what to do if you're running late, but it also includes behavioral expectations of the client and the therapist while they are working together, such as the client can't show up to a therapy session while they are under the influence of substances, and the therapist cannot push their views on their client. Once you and the therapist sign and agree on the policy practices, you then move on to other things, such as informed consent. Informed consent essentially means that the therapist cannot do anything to you without you knowing about it first, without you knowing what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what the consequences could be. This could be something as simple as trying a new therapeutic technique, or something a little more complicated like starting psychological medications. Either way, this is about you and your health, so it is important that you know what's going to happen and that you consent to everything before it happens. The next big topic that you're probably going to go over in your paperwork is confidentiality. Now, a lot of people believe that confidentiality means whatever you tell your therapist, they can't tell anybody else, no matter what. However, there are some exceptions to this confidentiality rule. In general, yes, what you tell your therapist should not be said outside of those walls. However, if you're a danger to yourself or to someone else, that therapist has a legal duty to say something. Confidentiality can also become a little confusing for minors or anybody else with a legal guardian, because those guardians feel like they should have a right to know what's going on, and they do to an extent, but they don't have a right to know everything. So at that point, it's the therapist's job to walk that line, to keep the trust and confidentiality of the client as much as possible, while also keeping the guardian informed of what's going on. Speaking of confidentiality, there are also release forms that you're going to have to sign if you want your therapist to be able to talk to anybody. Now, this includes your other doctors or people in your personal life. There are different forms for those two things. However, it is very important that if you want your therapist to be able to speak with anybody in your life or any of your doctors, that you sign those forms, because legally without them, they cannot share your information. Once you get through the introduction and all of the paperwork, we finally get to do the thing that you came to do, talk about you. Now, in future therapy sessions, the structure will probably be a little more loose. However, in this first intake session, it feels a lot like an interview. The therapist is going to ask you a lot of questions, and then you answer them and move on to the next question. You're going to be answering questions about your personal and family mental health history, your personal and family medical history, your relationship with your family of origin, your romantic relationship history, your support system, your career, your living situation, any substance abuse. The therapist will ask you questions about all areas of your life, so that way they know what areas they need to focus in on in therapy. After the therapist interviews you all about your background, then you can talk about why you're really there. They'll ask you questions about the presenting problem. What is the reason that you came to therapy? What happened to bring you into the office that day? They'll ask you all about the symptoms you're experiencing, what those symptoms are, how often they're bothering you, and how severe they are. You may also have to take an assessment depending on whether or not your symptoms fit very well into a certain diagnosis. For example, if a person comes in saying that they're sad all the time, they feel guilty, they feel feelings of worthlessness, they can't sleep, and they're overeating, they may at that point do a short assessment for depression. This is also the time that you want to bring up your goals for therapy. Why are you coming? What do you want to get out of it? What are the things that you think that you need to get out of therapy to make it successful for you? Make sure that you tell the therapist these things so that way they can plan accordingly as well. At this point, the therapist will know a lot about you. They'll know about your history. They'll know about your current problems. So from there, you got to figure out where you're going. Together, you'll make a tentative plan. How often do you need to come in for therapy? Typically, people go once a week. However, that changes depending on the severity of symptoms, but also on financial issues. For example, when I didn't have insurance, I only went to therapy every other week because I couldn't afford every week. You'll also know how long your sessions are going to be. Now, usually an intake appointment is a little bit longer than a regular appointment, so this time you may be there for up to an hour and a half. However, most therapists do their normal weekly appointments for 45 minutes to an hour. This is also the time that you should talk to your therapist about psychiatric medication, about whether they think that a consult with a psychiatrist could be useful for you, or whether they think that you should just stick to therapy at the moment. While you and the therapist are making this plan together, it's also really important to ask, especially if you're in a practice with a bunch of therapists, if this is the person that you will be continually working with. Most often, intake therapy appointments are given to whichever therapist is available on the schedule at that time, not necessarily which therapist will fit best for you. For example, a lot of female clients feel more comfortable with female counselors, whereas the male clients feel a lot more comfortable with male counselors. It's also common that if a person of color comes in as a client, that they're going to want a counselor that is also a person of color. Now, the practice can't guarantee that you will get exactly what you want in a therapist, but if you have any ideas about certain characteristics that you prefer, this would also be the time to say those things. Once you and your therapist have completed putting that tentative plan together, you know when you're coming, how often you're coming, how long for, what the problems are, what goals you want to reach, all of those sorts of things. Then they're going to ask you if you have any other questions. Do not be afraid to ask anything. I know people always say that there is no such thing as a stupid question, but when you're starting something for the first time, there really is no such thing as a stupid question. Not only is any question valid, but the answers to those questions that you're having may help you feel more comfortable in therapy, which will make the process better for everybody. So please, if you have questions, ask them. You're going to be sitting across from a therapist who has been trained to be non-judgmental. They're not going to judge you. They don't care what you ask. They just want you to feel safe and secure in therapy. Once you're done asking all of your questions, you're free to leave and you finally made it through your first therapy appointment. At this point, I think it's really important for you to do something for yourself. It doesn't have to be anything really big, but therapy is hard and you did it. You finally did it. So go get that ice cream, go get that Starbucks, go get whatever is a special treat for you, because you did it and you deserve to be rewarded. I'm not gonna lie to you. Therapy's hard and it can be stressful and can give you a lot of anxiety, especially when you're starting off at first. But it can also completely change your life if you're willing to be consistent and to put that work into yourself. I promise it will be worth it. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video. I hope that you learned something and that you're a little more comfortable starting therapy for the first time. If you have any questions about what I've said today, or you have a topic that you'd like to see me cover in the future, just make sure to leave it down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button and that like button. I'm Devin, this has been Just a Mental Note, and I'll see you next week.